This is a show that brings to the forefront newsmakers, entertainers, and those making a difference in our lives and in our world. Each week, we will bring you diverse and unique topics that are guaranteed to stir your fascination.
This is Taking Care of Business with Richard Solomon.
Greetings, everyone. This is Richard Solomon. If you suffer from clutter, and believe me, I've myself included, a lot of people I know, our guest this week, Amanda Sullivan, is going to help us tackle the issue of clutter. And we're surrounded by it. There's digital clutter, there's paper clutter, there's physical object clutter. And she's the author of a great book. The book is called Organized Enough, the Anti-Perfectionist Guide to Getting and Staying Organized. And what I like it is the title, Organized Enough. Not, you don't need to be perfect. You don't need to, have the shredding van come and just shove everything out the door and it's all gone, and you're sitting there all empty and sad that everything's gone. because we're all attached. I'm sure a lot of this is emotional attachment. Why do we hold on to everything?
Well, there's a lot of there's different reasons. There's emotional attachment, and that could be about things that remind you of something in the past, or clothes that somebody gave you, or a certain idea you have of yourself. But then there's also fear. So a lot of times the fear comes in with paper, like, I'm not sure if I need it. I'm not sure if I need the receipt from 5 years ago or 10 years ago. So sometimes the fear has to do with a lack of education, or sometimes it's financial insecurity, like somebody might be making really a lot of money now, but they have this fear that the bottom's going to drop out, so then they hold on to things that really should be garbage because they've already replaced them. So there's all different reasons, and it's all, there's all different emotions that make people hold on. Nostalgia, fear,
legal compliance.
Yeah, right. I think that the fear covers the legal compliance. I'm not sure legal compliance itself is an emotion, but so yeah, there's a lot of different strands, and sometimes people can have one strand going on about one thing and another one going on about another thing.
Well, I'll give you a great story that's personal to me, but it kind of encapsulates the problem, so we can kind of go into it. I get a letter in the mail that says, the Rhode Island Bridge Authority overcharged you. So they knew that. So if you have the receipts from like 10 years ago, we'll give you an 80-cent refund on each trip. Now, apparently I actually saved all of my receipts, and it gave me tremendous satisfaction to produce it because I had it scanned. Right. However, if you think about my hourly rate and the value of my time and what I was diverted away from, to get that $1.60 was not necessarily worth it.
Exactly. But, I had a similar thing happen where I really impressed some New York policemen because my bike got stolen, and they said, "Well, you don't have the receipt, do you?" And I ran into my apartment and reappeared in front of the building with my receipt from 5 years before, in 30 seconds, and they were like, "Wow!" But yeah, you're right. A lot of times the little stuff. If you have a habit, a lot of my book is about how to develop habits. So if, your receipt was a tax deduction because it was transportation for your work, and you had a habit of a way that you scanned them in a regular way, then it's efficient. But sometimes people want to sort of jump through hoops to do these things that they think are the right way to do it. And I say, really? Is it really that important? Because look at the amount of money that we're talking about, and is it really worth it, and do you really need it? So I always kind of ask them the questions, and sometimes they do. And then we try and figure what's the most efficient way to do it that you can get in a routine and keep it consistent.
Let me ask you a really good question about scanning and titling, because I've noticed that, like, let's say I have a case that comes in, and I'll call it something to start. Right. Smith File, NYC Waterboard. Right. But then the name changes because I understand the case a lot more, and then So how do you do naming conventions and things like that? Because I think that's also part of the problem, because you file it one way, but then you remember it another way, and then you can't find it even though you actually saved it.
Right. You have to really decide what that name is going to be, and it's almost like you have to have a system. It's always the name of the, lead person or whatever first, and that, whatever it is, you have to decide. And sometimes you might have to go back and relabel a few things. because maybe, like you say, a month into the case you realize, and maybe you just go back and relabel some of these things, because otherwise it's going to be worse nightmare afterwards. But I do tell people, and for most people, you're a lawyer, that's a particular huge amount of paper. But for a lot of people, just thinking about it ahead of time, how am I going to label this? And I always say, put the name of whatever it is first, then the date, because the dates are the same, whichever client or whatever it is. So you don't really want to do it by date. You really want the name first and then the date in most cases. But it's really important to have that consistent, because people think, oh, it's so great to scan. Well, it's not so great to scan if you're going to, because in my system, eventually everything goes. Every piece of paper that comes into your house or every document has a shelf life, right? If it's about something that's happening next week at your kid's school, its shelf life is a week. If it's a tax document, its shelf life might be 7 years. But eventually it's going to go. And so if you're talking about digital files, if they're eventually going to go and you have to open each one of them, that's actually more time consuming than just looking at papers. So I want you to just be able to look at the whole file and say, you know what, that's 15 years old, it can go, or whatever it is. So I really like people to label it so that they can delete it quickly without opening each document at a certain point in time.
You seem to have an incredible passion for all of this organization. How did you find the path? I'm sure there was some trial and error, but what led you on this direction?
My career path was, sometimes I speak at my kids' school for career day, and I draw this picture, and I say, some people think when they grow up they want to be a doctor, and they do well in math and science, and then they go to college and do pre-med, and then they go to medical school, and then they're a doctor. I said, it wasn't like that for me. And then I draw this big squiggle on the chalkboard. So, I was an actor, then I got a master's in gender politics, so I did a lot of different things. But I'll tell you a funnier story. When I had my business about 4 or 5 years, one day the phone rang, and this woman said, is this Amanda Sullivan who went to, and she named my high school? I said, yeah. And she said, well, this is, and she said her name, and she said, somebody gave me your number as an organizer, and I knew it had to be you because you used to organize our lockers before Mrs. Finn's locker inspections in 8th grade. And I thought, oh my gosh, all of that acting and the master's degree, it was all just a big red herring. I was always meant to do this. I was getting paid in 8th grade because we had this crazy teacher who would dump your desk if it was messy and tear everything out of your, so people used to pay me and I used to love it. Organizing their lockers and desks. Yep.
That's amazing. Now, yeah. I actually went to military school. And what was amazing back then was the logic and organization that just flowed. There was a time for everything. There was a place for everything. Right. It was a minimalist existence because you only needed so much stuff. Right. There really wasn't a lot of paper. Right. And it was just truly perfect. Right. Now, fast forward all these years to, law firm, radio show, and all this other stuff. And all day long, you're inundated. There's the post office, the FedEx, the processor for all kinds of stuff, just flying all over the place. Emails one after another, because everybody has to have your email because there's special offers and this and that. And before you know it, you need to get more space in your, email account.
What I really like to tell people, one thing is to chunk your time. So I hate, and I think everybody has ADD now. I feel like iPhones are ADD, and everybody's getting pulled from the pinging of their phone to an email's coming in to the phone's ringing. And I tell people, sit down at your desk in the morning and first do the hardest thing. Do the thing that you have to write or the thing that's really going to take some thought when you're clear, and don't answer anything for that chunk of time. And, maybe you want to do emails first and then do the hard thing. But really say, I'm just going to do emails for this half hour. I'm just going to, and don't constantly respond to those texts. People don't die when you don't respond to their text right away. I've tried it. I've been doing it myself. Nobody's died. Nobody's even stopped speaking to me. So, it's okay to let a text swing in the wind. And sometimes I find with emails in particular, when it's a chain, it's so much more efficient to wait until everybody else has said, I can't do this day, I can't do that day, I can't do the other day, and then I can just come in and say, okay, so it sounds like it's Tuesday at 8.
Now, what's kind of interesting is I think technology has created digital clutter in the following way. When we had the old cameras, you had 36 shots. And that was it, and then you had to take the film out and start over. So you were judicious in the amount of pictures you took.
Right.
Now you can take 5,000 pictures and it's not necessarily enough.
Right.
And remember the busy signal? That was actually really cool because call waiting is also kind of a way of digital clutter in the sense that you're interrupted. And I think what you're talking about is the whole gear shifting thing. You're doing one thing, and then you're doing another, and then you're going back, and then you're going back. And you're losing your momentum and your focus.
And your focus. And it takes time to get your focus back, every single one of these things that we do. So, and it's interesting, too, about the photos. I actually spent a huge chunk of time today. And, I've had various systems over the years to deal with my photos. And I don't know, about 10 years ago, I started this thing where when the kids first went to camp in the summer, I would get some, physical pictures from the year. And I would do one order, and I'd put them in an album because I like to have one actual album of each year, just hitting the high points. Because I feel like, all those, it's not as fun. You can't sit on the couch and look at them. It's not the same. But it's gotten harder because of, the phone. It's trickier than it used to be when I would have them in my camera and then I'd upload them to Shutterfly or whatever. So it's interesting how the technology changes, and you have to keep adapting your systems because for a while I had a pretty great system. Then it got more complicated, so then you're going to have to evolve to the next system. But, one of the things I talk about in my book is about boundaries, and this goes for time like we're talking about, but also about stuff, like what is reasonable? How much time do I spend in a day on Facebook or Twitter? How many clothes fit in my dresser? If I have one dresser and it's full, do I actually need to go buy another, or do I just need to eliminate my clothes? So I like the idea of sort of drawing a box around things and saying, okay, that's enough. That's enough clothes. That's as much time as I'm willing to spend on Facebook, and I'm not going to just go there by default every time, I pick up my phone. So I like to have some limits.
So in pre-production, there was the following two questions that kind of came up that I was asked to pass along as a question.
Okay.
So in terms of clothing, there's two issues with clothing. Number one, there's the nostalgia clothing, like, oh wow, that was my jacket when I went to the Guns N' Roses concert in 1987, and Axl Rose autographed the right arm, even though it doesn't fit me.
Right.
And the other thing is, those were my thin clothes, and I know that one day I'll be back in fighting shape, and all that stuff will fit me. Right. So how do we reconcile all of that?
Okay, well, if Axl Rose actually signed your jacket sleeve,
but you can't prove it.
But you could frame it in plexiglass and hang it up. But if it's just nostalgia, because I remember, a lot of people have, but I remember when I wore that when my child was small. I'm like, well, I assume you didn't go around naked when your child was small. You had to wear something. But, a lot of these clothes are in pictures from the time. So I'll say to somebody, well, yes, you wore that to your, whatever fancy event, but there are pictures from that event, right? So do you actually need the item? So I think sometimes people can take a picture and that can help them let go of it. And in terms of the thin clothes, I always say, Murphy's Law. If you get rid of the thin clothes, then you'll lose the weight and you'll need them again. So guess what? You just, now you have to go buy some new clothes because you're thin again. Yay. Good. That was so much cheaper than, than all the different things we've tried to lose weight. So there's that. And but again, I'm very strict with myself. I tease my husband. I say I'm too cheap to gain weight because, I don't want to buy any new clothes. But I think don't have too many, because then when they go out of style or you gain weight or all these things, it's not such a big loss. If you sort of have a minimalist wardrobe to start out with, it's not a big deal if you decide, the 8s really aren't fitting anymore, I got to go to the 10s. Because it's not as much as if you're, have a huge, huge wardrobe. So keep it minimalist and you'll be better off all around.
How much of this is tied to separation anxiety in one way or another? I'm going to miss my stuff. I need my stuff. This is important to me. I identify with this.
Yeah,
and without it, I'm a little less whole.
Right, but I mean, I sort of specialize in sitting in a room with people and poking holes in their arguments for why they need things, and sometimes it's really funny. Like I had a very elegant older woman client who I mentioned in the book, and she had this fabulous, huge wardrobe, but then she had stockings of every single color to go with every single thing. But then once we started really going through them, I said, really, do you need green stockings to go with a green suit? Couldn't you just wear nude, or couldn't you just wear, And then when we started going through them, a lot of them, the elastic was shot because they were so old. And so, at the end, we dumped, hundreds of pairs of pantyhose, and she sort of committed to she was just going to get, black and nude and see if everything was okay. But people do have these ideas. They have ideas about what's right, and sometimes, the ideas are outdated, or the ideas are, left over from their mother, and they don't really have to do that. So I just like to poke holes in their ideas and make them think about them. And you know what? Sometimes they can't let go, or they won't let go, or they think they're right. But sometimes they can say, oh, you're right. I didn't think of it that way.
How do you deal with the paper flow of an office? Because I've often been told that clutter is the result of indecision. I
mean, I think that's true. And some, a lot of times I'm dealing with people in home offices, and a lot of my clients have very creative professions. So there's that executive idea about, you never touch a piece of paper more than once. But that's not always true. Sometimes there's something that you're referring back to, or it was inspiring to you. But in terms of bills coming in, things needing to be signed off on, contracts you have to read, yes, those things should come out, and you should deal with them, and they should either go to file or go back out. And there's a section that I have that works for both businesses and personal, which is pending. That means you took your action, but now you're waiting for the result. So it can't be filed or sent off yet because you're waiting for somebody to get back to you or something like that, but the ball's not in your court. So you might have to, keep it, but you don't have to have it in your active to-do pile because you're waiting for something to happen. But I talk in the book about every piece of paper needs to have a path. Like you have to think about, where does that go? It comes in, I pay it, I read it, I do whatever I'm going to do, and then where does it go? Does it get filed? Does it get shredded? Does it get scanned? So that you know in your head where it's going to go, and then, like I was saying before, is it going to disappear in a week or 6 months or 10 years?
All right, this is Richard Sullivan. This show is a co-production of Rocket Green Radio and Small Business Rescue. We are talking to Amanda Sullivan, the author of Organized Enough, the Anti-Perfectionist Guide to Getting and Staying Organized. We need to take a break. Please keep it locked in. We'll be right back.
Hey, this is Jeff Mattson, the Dark Star Orchestra, and you're listening to Richard Solomon on WCWP 88.1 FM.
All right, welcome back. Richard Solomon and Amanda Sullivan, who is our expert on organization. So we're talking about her book, Organized Enough, the Anti-Perfectionist Guide to Getting and Staying Organized. And believe me, I'm having her come by to the office with a limo tomorrow and eat anything you want and charge anything you want, because it'll really, the efficiency will pay for itself. So how did you actually organize your book? Because if you're talking about organization, you must have really given a lot of thought to how you were going to organize the book for all of us, the readers, to actually absorb it in a way that would actually help us.
Right. Well, I did have, and I talked a lot before I pitched the book to my agent about how to do it. But one thing I really wanted to include in my book, because I think it's key, is different habits. Because I think that it's one thing to get organized. A lot of people can get organized, but they can't stay organized. And to do that, you have to develop habits. But the other thing that clients have told me over the years, they'll say, oh, you said that thing and it really opened it up for me, and all of a sudden I got it. And I think to myself, geez, I've been saying that same thing to them for 10 years, but sometimes it's just a slight shift in the way you think that makes you able to get organized. So the first half of my book is 7 different ways of thinking. so that you can open your mind, because you can't really change until you sort of are thinking differently. And then the second half is 7 different habits that you can develop in order to stay organized. And it really explains to you how to develop the habits, because we have this great new neuroscience now that really explains how you can really only build like a habit a month and to really develop it, and how you need like a cue and a reward. So I really go into the science of that so people could really spend, 7 months building these habits. But, not everybody will need every one. And some people might read these 7, think of another one that they need too, and now they'll know how to develop it.
So speaking of staying organized,
yes.
One of the biggest problems that people have is they're sort of organized and they go on vacation.
Right. Right.
And then they come back to piles of paper, piles of emails,
right.
voicemail, and then all of a sudden their trajectory
right.
has just been, you've derailed.
Right. It's funny because my second chapter is called Slow Down, You Move Too Fast, because people think that, to get organized, we have to move faster. But actually, everybody I know, all my clients, everybody's moving too fast and doing too much. So there's this kind of chaos. But second of all, if you have really worked on habits, you won't have to think as hard. The reason people get stuck is because they have to think about each piece of paper and each thing. And if you really develop these habits and have these pathways in your house for, okay, what do I do with this sweater? What do I do with this piece of paper? You don't have to think as much, and then you can do it faster, because it's not as laborious. So, it's just automatic. Because a lot of times when we get home at night or when we get home from vacation, we're kind of fried. So we don't want to use that executive function part of our brain. We just want to be able to do something sort of manual and routine. So,
like watching TV.
but if you know where everything goes, you can do that. You can open the mail quickly if you have a system, If you have a system and okay, all of this goes in the shredder, all of this goes in the bills to pay, this goes on my wife's desk. You can do it quickly if you really don't have to think too hard. And another big thing I would say about mail while we're on the topic is try to stem the flow. With email, I make a lot of stuff into junk, so it just doesn't even come. And with mail, I have this little thing where I rip off the backs of any catalogs that arrive, and someday when I'm procrastinating, I'll call a couple of catalog companies and get them to stop. And, you always get them back, because then you'll buy something with a credit card somewhere and all of a sudden you're getting another one. But generally, I get much less mail than I used to, because I've really made the effort to stem the flow. And it also saves trees. So.
Right. So from an environmental point of view, you're doing something that's really important.
Right. And it just makes it so much easier, because people get daunted. And actually, half the time when I sit down with people and they'll have some huge stack of mail, 85% of it is junk right off the bat. But it just looked daunting when they did, they were away on vacation and they came back and there was a huge, Bloomingdale's shopping bag of mail that their neighbor collected for them. It seems like, oh my God. But really, so much of it's catalogs and proxies and stuff that, stuff that you don't even look at anyway. So just, try and stem the flow. Get everything, to come to you digitally that you can, and digitally mark all this stuff as junk. And also, that helps you not buy. Because, I used to get the Garnet Hill catalog, and really it made me want everything in there, because I love everything at Garnet Hill, but I don't need anything at Garnet Hill. So I stopped getting the catalog, and now, if, my sheets tear, I can go online to Garnet Hill and find it, because I know that I love Garnet Hill. But if I get the catalog, it's just going to fill me with wants that I don't need. So why do that?
This goes right nicely into the next question that we had from pre-production interviews.
Okay.
Someone wanted to know, what are the strategies to help children, especially young children, become organized in their rooms, in their toys, homework, paper, school, camp?
Well, I love this. So, I have a label maker. And when my son was young, I labeled all the baskets, like vehicles and action figures and all this stuff, which happened to work really well with Montessori, because he went to Montessori school. And, at Montessori school, they label everything. Like they'll label the chair, table, because they believe that seeing the word on the thing, even if you aren't teaching reading, promotes literacy. So I labeled all these baskets, and then I remember one time I just sat down on the couch, and he came in and he said, "Where's Buzz Lightyear?" And I said, "He's in the action figure basket A is for action. And I knew that he couldn't read, but I knew he knew his alphabet. And sure enough, he went and he found the basket with the action figure, and he found Buzz Lightyear. So, there's so many reasons. But the other thing to know is all kids are different. I have 3 kids, and they all sort of have different relationships to neatness and organization because they're different people. But I think that, labeling things is great. A lot of my clients have a lot of different people in the house. They might have a couple of kids. They might have a babysitter. They might have grandma come sometimes. So I say label the insides of the drawers, because if somebody different does laundry, it helps them know where to put the T-shirts and the shorts and whatever if they're labeled. So I'm a big one for labeling, especially for kids, and also for weeding. When my kids put on something and it's too small, I have somebody I give my son's clothes to. I have somebody I give my daughter's clothes to. We put it right in a bag by the front door. We take it the next time we're going to see that person. And then at the holidays and at their birthday, we always do a big weed beforehand. And the truth is they don't weed as much as they receive, but I like planting the idea that you're about to get an influx, so let's do a weed first.
That's actually pretty healthy.
Yeah.
Are some people just inherently organized and others less so?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, and I don't say that with any judgment whatsoever. I have twins, so my twins are 11 now. And it used to be so much easier for my son. He would sit down and he would play with Legos. And then when he was done, he would put the Legos back in the Lego basket. And that was easy. And he is kind of like that. He's kind of orderly and, neat. He likes to draw on blue and black pen. But my daughter, on the other hand, when it would be time for her to clean up when she was little, she would lay down on the floor and sob. Well, of course, because when I looked at what she was playing with, she would have a doll stroller, and in the doll stroller would be my evening bag, and in my evening bag would be a carrot peeler from the kitchen, and she would have played this whole game all over the house. But now putting things away was going to be really hard because she had gathered from all over. But she's totally creative, so I don't judge, but people are just different. They're different how their minds work. They're different. And I will say that now she's 11 and she really cares how her room looks, so it's now much neater than her brother's because she has, she's into social media and she likes to watch these room makeovers. So anybody can change, but I just think that minds work differently, and a lot of my clients are super creative, and there's this wool gathering. They see pretty things. I tease a lot of my clients who are, women in their 60s and 70s that they're like my daughter because they're like, ooh, sparkly, pretty. They go shopping and they see attractive things and they want them. They want to possess them. But, we can't possess everything.
I remember listening to some interview where somebody said, we have just tons of houses full of stuff and it's killing us.
Yeah.
What are your tips on storage in the house as far as everything? Not just paper, but food and clothing and
right. So this goes to boundaries, right? So when typically I'll go to a client and we'll work on a room, say it's the bedroom, and we'll weed and I'll get everything beautifully fitting in the closet and beautifully fitting in the dresser, and then I'll say this much and no more. So now if you buy something, you have to let go of something. So don't buy anything if you're going to have a hard time letting go of anything. So wait till things wear out. Really in my life, I'm really in a replacement-only mode, So when my jeans have holes in them, I get new ones, but really not until then. And the same thing in the kitchen. We'll go through, we'll do a big weed, we'll get rid of the, coconut milk from their flirtation with Thai cuisine that has an old expiration date, and then we label the cabinets, like this is baking, this is cans, this is pasta and grains, like that. And then and I talk about inventory, right? So you can't have an inventory that's not moving in your kitchen or anywhere. You have to have what fits, like how many sheets do you have? So don't go and buy another set of sheets if you already have a backup set for every bed in the house. That's enough. Your inventory is full. You don't need any more. So you have to think of it like it's a business.
So in terms of food, what's the best way to organize your pantry? Because I've read reports that, Americans waste, X percentages of their weekly groceries.
Oh, it's terrible.
And it's like, it's everywhere. It's homes, it's restaurants, it's gymnasiums.
I really hate appreciate that, and I really try. I mean, first of all, I live in New York. I have 3 kids. I have a tiny refrigerator. I have a, small kitchen, so I don't have a lot of room. But I really try, my husband teases me because I'll get down on the floor to put the groceries away, but because I want to put the old yogurts in the back and bring the new yogurts, or, put the new yogurts in the back and bring the old yogurts to the front, so that I'm always rotating my inventory. So I'm not going to get stuck with old ones because, we didn't eat them in the proper order. And the same thing, I try, we have a whole system where we keep a list, and, I know what I get every week, but then I update it, and I just try to never overbuy. I never do the thing where I think, I go with a plan to the grocery store, and I don't say, maybe I should make that, and I'm not sure if I have peppers. I know before I go whether or not I have peppers.
I know that the people who specialize in sort of dieting and lifestyles changes, say, you should go to the supermarket knowing what your week's menu is going to be,
right,
and then just buy that. But most of us don't really do it. We just buy stuff, or we buy things that look interesting, and then we try to find a home or a purpose for them.
Right. No, I'm not. And I really try to be very strict. And I typically in a week, my husband actually takes the list that I make to the big grocery store, and then I'll go to the farmer's market. So there's 2 different days when we're shopping. But I do have a weekly menu plan, and I try not to go off. Now, you could switch something around. Like, my son really got sick of chicken, so I switched that for shrimp one day, but I didn't, just go add an extra protein, and also I talk in the book about how whole foods, which are healthier, are also more flexible foods. So I say, like, onions are the black turtleneck of your kitchen, that, black turtleneck goes with everything. Onion you're going to use in everything. So, you're always going to have onions around. But, once you start buying something that's a specialty thing that comes in a box that you're supposed to add water to, that can only be that thing, But rice, you can make it into 15 different kinds of rice. And onions, you can use it in a million things. So I think it's more practical to be healthier.
So what should a pantry look like? When you walk into a pantry and say the average household, what should that pantry look like?
Well, in terms of a pantry where you have your dry goods, I do organize it by category. So I would have pasta and grains on one shelf, and not too many of any one thing. And I'd put the most recent at the back, coming towards the front. Say you had 3 boxes of mac and cheese, you're going to have the oldest one in the front, so that you're rotating. And then I have my cans in one section, maybe jars in another section. Baking generally is up high because most people don't bake every day. And sometimes there's like a section of tea, coffee, hot chocolate, beverage section, So I do it like that, and I try to make the stuff that people use the most. So there might be, crackers and snacks and things like that at the easiest shelf, because that's the one people are constantly going to. So I try and use, logic, but also just to make it easy access. So this is back to your question about storage. I joke that storage is like, Hollywood. It's all about access, because I can squirrel things away in anybody's apartment and make them, not visible. But if they can't get to them when they need them, I haven't really done them any good. So I really want storage to always be accessible. Like, if you only use it once a year, okay. If you have to get it on a ladder in the closet, that's okay. But if you're using it constantly, and I've chosen a place high in the closet, then you're never going to put it away because it's too hard. And a lot of times people have a lot of storage, but it's too full, so it's too hard to get into and out of, so they just leave it full, and they end up putting stuff on the desktop or whatever instead of actually putting it away, because it's too hard to put it away. So it has to be easy.
We only have about 2 minutes in this segment.
Okay.
But when you walk into a grocery store, what do you think generally of the way it's organized?
Well, I'll tell you, I go to Fairway, and there was a point where I was really annoyed with them because I actually have a computer list, and I used to do it the way that Fairway was organized, the way I would walk through Fairway. And then they kept changing it for a while, so my list wasn't making any sense. I was having to jump all around because they kept reorganizing. But so I do like to make a list that literally follows the way I'm going to walk through the store. So whether that's vegetables first or whatever, but I try to, have a system. Always have a system.
Now, is your system for grocery shopping paper-based or like tablet-based or iPhone or Android-based?
My personal one is that, I have a piece of scratch paper that I write it on during the week if I use something up, like I used up balsamic vinegar or whatever, and then I go take that to my computer list and change it before my husband goes. And I actually print it out for him because he prefers it that way. Now, you could email it. And some of my clients, I've set them up with using notes or something similar in their iPhones where they'll have like one grocery store list in one note. And that way, if, their babysitter or their husband stops by that store, they can text them that note right then that they've been sort of maintaining in their phone.
We are talking with Amanda Sullivan. We're getting organized, which is really, really cool. Her book, published by DeCapo Life Books, is called Organized Enough, the Anti-Perfectionist Guide to Getting and Staying Organized. And believe it or not, we are not perfectionists here. So we love that. All right, keep it locked in. We'll be right back. We'll be continuing with our really important and really enlightening discussion with Amanda, who's been generous to be with us today. So keep it locked in. We'll be right back.
Hi, this is the Great Thordini. You're listening to Richard Solomon on 88.1 FM WCWP.
We are back. This is Richard Solomon. Thank you so much for being a part of our audience. We are talking with Amanda Sullivan today, who is a true expert and a really important person to both our business and personal lives because she's an organizational expert. As you probably heard throughout the broadcast, in case you're coming in now, she wrote a great book published by DeCapo Life Books called Organized Enough, the Anti-Perfectionist Guide to Getting and Staying Organized. So let's talk about some dynamics you talk about in the book.
Okay.
You talk about something called flow.
Okay, so flow, so this is the first chapter of my book, and this is sort of the most important thing. So flow works in two ways. It's a mnemonic device. Forgive yourself, let stuff go, organize what's left, weed constantly. That's how you're going to get organized. But it also works as a metaphor because I really like to think of your home or your office like a body. Like if there's blockages, if there's stagnancy, that's bad. Things come in, things go out. When we get cluttered, it's because things are coming in and not enough's going out. So you've got to sort of rebalance. So as much is leaving as is coming in. And what you realize after you do, the hard work of getting organized is that it's really hard to let go of stuff. So you've got to really work on not bringing so much in. So, and people say, forgive yourself. What does that have to do? But I find, and this goes to the subtitle of my book, The Anti-Perfectionist Guide, is that people are so hard on themselves. I mean, I've had people say to me, oh, I'm bad, I'm sick, I don't know what's wrong with me. And these aren't, horrible hoarders. These are sophisticated people who live in Manhattan and have, much nicer apartments than mine. So, but they're just really hard on themselves. And I don't think that works. I say, if beating yourself up with a stick worked, I'd give you a stick, but it doesn't work. It gets in the way. And it's sort of, you're a parent, so there's this idea that you don't ever tell the child they're bad, you tell them the behavior is bad. So when people think I'm bad, I'm just disorganized, no, it's just they have some bad habits, and we can fix habits. If they were truly disorganized, it would be, something that we couldn't fix, but they just have some bad habits that we can fix.
How much of each day should be dedicated to weeding out?
Well, ideally, not very much, because ideally, once you got organized, until you get organized, it could be as much time as you have to spend on it, whether you said I was going to spend a half an hour every night. But once you get organized, it should really just be sort of an automatic part of your routine. When my husband and I do our taxes, we have a routine where the stuff from 7 years ago we shred. So it's a whole system, but it takes 5 minutes, and that's the biggest shred of the year. It takes more than 5 minutes, but it doesn't, it takes 5 minutes to know what's going to be shredded. So, you just have to have systems, and once you have systems, like I was saying before about, my kids, they know they put on something too small, leave it on mommy's desk, and, she'll pass it on to the other kids. So there are these systems that just get automatic. I don't spend much time at all.
So you really need to understand the organic nature of the flow of things in your own home or business.
Right. And when you go through that to make your systems, if you go through the book and you make these systems, then, it will be revealed to you and you'll sort of work on where your systems are weak and where you need to improve them. And you really have to go through each area and think it out.
Now, you talk also about fresh eyes.
Yes.
Now, that's probably your role to all of us, because you actually are the fresh eyes, because you're the one who says to us, do you really need this,
Right.
And you're the one who's challenging everybody's assumptions.
Exactly. And I come in, and also sometimes people don't even see it. Like, they know it's cluttered, and they know they're disorganized, but they don't really see the piles, or, sometimes somebody makes the piles and it bothers the other spouse. And so, but I say, there are little tricks you can do. So say you want to get your living room organized. So invite somebody over for dinner, because once you are thinking about them coming into your house, and I say, don't invite the friend whose house is worse than yours, but don't invite the most intimidating person you know. Just invite somebody who you like, who seems like a reasonable person, who you'd like to get to know better, and invite them for 2 weeks from now. And then start looking around your living room, dining room, and thinking, oh, I didn't even know that pile has been sitting on the sideboard for 6 months. What is that? Oh, that's the schoolwork from June that we dropped here before we went on vacation, and then we never touched. And actually, I can throw it all right into the dumpster, So, fresh eyes. Just look at your space as though, another trick people I've heard before say, look at your house as though you're about to put it on the market. Like, what would you declutter if you were about to show it to a real estate agent? So, fresh eyes.
All right. Who am I today?
Who are you? Okay, who are you now? So, who are you? Are you still wearing those clothes? Like, sometimes people have clothes that they're attached to from a different part of their life, and it's not who they are anymore. If you used to stay at home and you had 85 pairs of jeans because you wore them every day to the playground, and now you're going to work in a suit every day, you no longer need 85 pairs of jeans because you only wear them on Saturday and Sunday. So you need to weed them down, to maybe 4. So you really have to be honest about who you are now when you are going through stuff.
What is the hardest hurdle for people to get over? Is it just the getting rid of stuff?
Everybody's different. That's what I love about my work. Every single person's different. Some people fly through stuff. They have really great executive function. And then some people fly through one area, and then another area is really sticky for them. And some people, every area is sticky, So it's just completely unique. But I think a lot of people are too busy. And, papers are very hard because they have to really think about them. Papers are very slow going because you have to really read them. It's not like a shirt, I hold it up, you like it, you don't like it, maybe you have to try it on. But a paper, you might actually have to read it and think, do I need it legally, blah, blah, blah. It's more time consuming.
What do you do with things like, business cards? I go to trade shows all the time. And, the Javits Center, I'll go to the Fancy Food Show, I'll go to Book Expo, and you get inundated with cards, and they're all important. And the cards, at least to me, I've interviewed a number of different people. I will have taken different photographs. I have to do the sound editing. I have to email them that says, hey, thanks for being on, and here's a copy of your segment. And I have to consolidate it all and put it into like an hour show. And I have Chris Maffei, who's a great editor, helps me with all of this stuff. But it's still a lot of digital and paper material. And sometimes for me, it's a lot to get organized. What's a good approach to all of that?
Well, again, I would say chunking your time. Like if business cards are something that you're actually going to enter into like a database, I would just leave them till they get to be a stack of, however many, and then sit down for half an hour and knock it out. I don't want you to be distracted by doing, one at a time. And if you go to a trade show, maybe when you get back, you have an hour's worth of entry to do from all those cards and all that stuff that you want to enter. But I don't particularly want you to keep all those business cards. Now, my husband's a very visual person, and he saves business cards. He doesn't enter them in a database. He just saves them, but he's very good at sort of just being able to pick up a stack of business cards in his hand and find the one he's looking for. So that's his system. It works for him. I don't like it. I like to put all information in one database in my computer. But I would say that chunking is an important thing because you don't want to constantly be doing, it's that thing about moving from task to task.
So what is your position on the cloud because here you have all of this data being scanned and stored. Is the cloud our friend or is the cloud our enemy? Because it gives us an excuse to just save more in just a different place.
Yeah, I kind of think it's our enemy, and I actually wanted to write a play for my kids' school because, as we've discussed, I used to be an actor, and I used to do a theater thing at my kids' school, and I wanted to write a modern version of the sky is falling, except have it with, the cloud, the digital cloud is falling, and, oh, look, it's Miss Ramos' Spanish test from 1987 that just fell on my head out of the cloud, So, it's not it doesn't fit with my idea of boundaries, right? The idea is you're supposed to have a limit to how much you save, and then you're going to get rid of it. So, yes, I guess the cloud is our friend, but I kind of think it's a slippery slope, and I'd rather you just say, okay, I'm going to make a flash drive of my photos, once they get so that they're slowing my computer down. I'm going to put, the last 5 years on a flash drive and keep it that way. But, digital is so tricky because I have people who have all these floppy disks. So what do you do with those now? Was that stuff really important? Can we just pitch it? Or are we going to have to go find some place to now switch it over to another form? So I guess in that way, maybe the cloud is okay because maybe it's always going to be the right form, but I don't even know that because it's constantly technology is changing. So, and I kind of hate the idea that it's a huge, endlessly big space.
What I like about your limits idea is the fact that more is actually more in terms of expense. Think about it. You need more storage, you need more cloud, you need more this, you need more that. Well, that means you have to buy. You'd have to buy more things, or you have to rent more things.
Right.
And one of the things that surprises me to this day is the number of law firms and accounting firms that pay expensive real estate prices, physical real estate, to essentially store paper.
Right.
When you think, what does it cost per foot in Manhattan? And yet you see offices cluttered with boxes stacked all over the place. And then there are people who have storage companies that they use where the truck comes and they takes all the paper out. And you think of, just all the gas, the labor, the storage, the schlepping, the retrieval.
Crazy, yeah.
Now, as a lawyer, I understand that because the court system is very non-digital. It's still a very manual system. The New York State courts are very funny. It may be, the 21st century, but when you are called, you need to physically hand paper in, whether or not it's electronically filed. You actually have to hand this. And my favorite is, you go to court and you'll see, I'll go to court with a client, say, and they'll see, wow, somebody handed us something that looks like 20 Manhattan-sized telephone books of paper. And I'll just say, you see that? Nobody's reading that. I don't care what's in there. I don't care how great, how well researched. Nobody's reading that. But the court system is just clogged with paper, and the accountants too. You incorporate. You need this. You need that. You need your bank statements. It's just the amount. And then when you go to court to litigate. I'm doing some discovery responses right now to a case that I'm doing, and I have literally 4,000 sheets of paper that's part of this case, and it's only one component of the case. Right. And then when you throw in appeals and appendixes, it's like
Well, and people have a hard time letting go of stuff that represents work. So one thing that I see a lot in people's homes is, they live in New York City and they have these huge packets they put together when they applied for their, co-op board. And so there are these huge, huge, huge packets. But really, the packets are made up of things that they have in other places or that they can access in other ways, like bank statements and W-2s and this and that and the other. And if they ever applied to move to a different apartment, it would have to be recent bank statements. So a lot of that stuff is actually garbage and can be shredded because they gave it, they got in, it's done. And if they go to another one, it's going to have to be new, more current material. But it represents work. And so they remember how heinous it was putting that together, and so they kind of hate to shred it. And they have this fear about shredding it. And I say, well, you can keep the part that's the unique application to that co-op board, but why are you keeping all this stuff that is really just old stuff that you have in other places? It's just keeping duplication. But people have a hard time letting go of things that they labored to put together.
If you were to sit down with a business today and without even seeing what was inside,
Right.
what would you ask them at the beginning of your meeting with them to assess what's going on?
Does every piece of paper have a past? Is there somebody, one thing I think as a feminist, because I have a master's in gender politics, one of the things I think that we have a problem with organization is that we no longer really have secretaries. Secretaries used to sort of have systems and have a path and do all of this stuff. And now a lot of times we're doing it ourselves and we're trying to, be lawyers or doctors or whatever, job we have. And we're supposed to manage all this paper ourselves. So we don't really give it very much thought. Whereas when that's somebody's real job, sometimes they come up with a better system and they have a better idea of where it's going. So I think we give short shrift sometimes to what's the system for storing? How long do we have to store it? Are we legally bound to store it forever, or is it good enough to save it for 10 years?
And I guess in bigger organizations, when someone leaves the organization, to what extent do you need that person's stuff? Especially in a creative world, like
right.
maybe an advertising company. So what's the answer there?
Right. No, and that's industry by industry and person by person, and it's tricky. I guess a lot of people now use these, lock boxes and stuff that are for their company, and, I don't even understand all of it, but yeah, it's a tricky thing. But I do think everybody's tendency is to just save everything forever, and I think why? I worked with a photographer once, and we had gotten rid of a lot of her old work. And then she went to see some retrospective of another photographer, and she said, "Oh, I feel terrible. We've got rid of all that old stuff." I said, if you become very, very famous, now it'll be worth much more because you have much less.
That's an interesting bit. So in the last minute that we have, because I definitely want to talk about theperfectdaughter.com.
Yeah.
When people die, and that's very tragic and transitional,
right.
How do you approach the survivors of a tragedy on how to sort of clean out a house?
Right. I've helped a lot with that kind of thing. And, of course, it's a great thing for people to do when they're older. Like, it's great for people to downsize as they get older so that they've done some work for their heirs ahead of time. But, again, it's very individual. Sometimes all the kids will come and take what they want. Sometimes they'll fight. Sometimes they don't want anything. And then, it's sort of, okay, can we give this to charity? Can we sell this? Can we get a charity to come pick this up, or are we going to have to pay junk luggers? A lot of times there's sort of a, you first want to sell things. Second, first people take stuff, then you sell stuff, then you give stuff to charity, and then sometimes you have to pay to have stuff lugged off, unfortunately.
Exactly. All right, theperfectdaughter.com. What's that?
That's my business. My business is The Perfect Daughter Chaos Control. My website is theperfectdaughter.com, and I am The Perfect Daughter Chaos Control on Facebook, and you can follow me on Twitter at Uptown Amanda.
All right, great. And so the book is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all the great places, Kindle.
Yes, indie books, yes, if you prefer to not do the big bookstore. So, it's available all those places. So I hope people will read it, and feel free to email me if you have questions or want to discuss it.
And what's that email?
It's Amanda@theperfectdaughter.com.
There you go. So
it's on my website, yes.
So it's organized enough. The Anti-Perfectionist Guide to Getting and Staying Organized, .capo, D-A-C-A-P-O, Life Books. And I can't thank you enough. I've really learned a lot.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
I really, really think that the information is great out there. And I really recommend everybody out there, start the first thing tomorrow. Start weeding and organizing.
That's
and getting
right. Forgive yourself first.
Right.
Then let go.
Right. And let the flow and call Amanda, because you know what? She's the set of fresh eyes that we all need.
That's right. Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
And to all of you out there listening, I wish you a clutter-free week. Thanks for listening.